Ladies and gentlemen, this is an article that came out in the Washington Post, and I will leave the link to this article in the description box. U.S. military edge has eroded to a dangerous degree. Study for Congress find. And this came out November 14th, 2018. The United States has lost its military edge to a dangerous degree and could potentially lose a war against China or Russia, according to a report released Wednesday by a bipartisan commission that Congress created to evaluate the Trump administration's defense strategy. The National Defense Strategy Commission, comprised of former top Republican and Democratic officials selected by Congress, evaluated the Trump administration's 2018 National Defense Strategy, which ordered a vast reshaping of the U.S. military to compete with Beijing and Moscow in an era of renewed great power competition. While endorsing the strategy's aim, the commission warned that Washington isn't moving fast enough or investing sufficiently to put the vision into practice, risking a further erosion of American military dominance that could become a national security emergency. At the same time, according to the commission, China and Russia are seeking dominance in their regions and the ability to project military power globally. As their authoritarian governments pursue defense buildup aimed squarely at the United States, there is a strong fear of complacency that people have become so used to the United States achieving what it wants in the world, to include militarily, that it isn't heeding the warning signs, said Kathleen H. Hicks, a former top Pentagon official during the Obama administration and one of the commissioners. It's the flashing red that we are trying to relay. The picture of the national security landscape that a 12-person commission sketched is a bleak one, in which an American military that has enjoyed undisputed dominance for decades is failing to receive the resources, innovation, and prioritization its leaders need to outmuscle China and Russia in a race for military might reminiscent of the Cold War. The military balance has shifted adversely for the United States in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, undermining the confidence of American allies and increasing the likelihood of military conflict. The commission found, after reviewing classified documents, receiving Pentagon briefings, and interviewing top defense officials, the U.S. military could suffer unacceptably high casualties and loss of major capital assets in its next conflict. It might struggle to win or perhaps lose. A war against China or Russia, the report said, the United States is particularly at risk of being overwhelmed should its military be forced to fight on two or more fronts simultaneously. In its list of 32 recommendations, the commission urged the Pentagon to explain more clearly how it intends to defeat major power rivals in competition and war. It assailed the strategy for relying at times on questionable assumptions and weak analysis and leaving unanswered critical questions. Eric Edelman, a top Pentagon official during the Bush administration who co-chaired the commission along with retired Admiral Gary Roughhead, said the report wrestled the consequences of years of ignored warnings about the erosion of American military might. Russia and China have learned from what we've done. They've learned from our success. And while we've been off doing a different kind of warfare, they've been preparing for a kind of warfare at the high end that we really haven't engaged in for a very long time. Okay. Wow. They are pretty much putting out here, ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. ain't nowhere near prepared for a major conflict, but China and Russia are. Edelman said people had lost sight of how complicated the international security environment had become for the United States and argued that for a lot of reasons, the American public and Congress haven't been as attentive to the urgency of the situation as they should be. Wow. This don't sound very promising, y'all. The commission argued that despite a $716 billion American defense budget this year, which is 4 times the size of China's, is more than 10 times that of Russia, the effort to reshape the U.S. defense establishment to counter current threats is under-resourced. The recommended that Congress lift budget caps on defense spending in the next 2 years that in the past have hobbled the military's ability to plan for the long term. It is beyond the scope of our work to identify the exact dollar required to fully fund the military's needs, the report concluded. Yet available sources are clearly insufficient to fulfill the strategy's ambitious goals, including that of ensuring that deterring other enemies simultaneously. The call for even more robust defense spending comes as the Democrats take over the House and seek rollbacks of key Pentagon programs. It also comes after the White House instructed the Pentagon to pare back its planned budget for the coming year by some 4.5%, or about $33 billion. So the Trump administration is telling the Pentagon to cut its budget after the federal deficit increased sharply following last year's tax cut. White House National Security Advisor John Bolton recently said he expects the defense budget to remain relatively flat in the coming years, as the administration seeks to cut discretionary spending and suggests the Pentagon would need to reshape the military with funds. Okay, so so everything is underfunded, and wow. So they have not kept up with the other big nations on the planet as far as building up security. So they are saying that Russia and China has grown their Navy and their submarine divisions, and the U.S. has not. To counter Russia and China, the commission said the Navy should expand its submarine fleet And sea lift forces, the Air Force should introduce more reconnaissance platforms and stealth long range fighters and bombers. And the Army should pursue more armor, long range precision missiles, and air defense and logistical forces. So that's where Russia and China is leading, and the US is actually behind on those things. You can't be no superpower and you're not even keeping up with the other countries. That's why a lot of people are predicting that America will lose its superpower status in the world. And now I can see why after reading something like this. In its recommendation, the report advocated seeing through the modernization of the US nuclear arsenal and putting atop Pentagon officials in charge of developing additional air and missile defenses. Another area of focus for the commission was innovation. It described current Pentagon acquisition programs to be too risk adverse and urged the Defense Department and Congress to create a new category of pilot programs aimed at leap ahead technologies that could serve as breakthroughs to help retain American military dominance. The report also resurfaced questions about the civilian military divide that arose after Mattis, a retired Marine Corps general, took over as defense secretary thanks to a vote in Congress that waived a requirement for military officers to be out of uniform for 10 years before serving in that role. In his nearly 2 years as secretary, Mattis has relied more on current and former military officers for expertise that his recent predecessors have. Without singling out Mattis, the commission warned that responsibility on key strategic and policy issues has increasingly mitigated to the military and urged Congress to exercise oversight to reverse the unhealthy trend in which decision making and drafting increasingly towards the military on issues of national importance. So the military in the US is now lagging behind China and Russia as far as everything is concerned right now. They are forging ahead, and the US has pretty much flatlined. That's not good. And it's not good to beat your chest and say you are the superpower and these nations are sailing right past you. And obviously, it's so bad that the Pentagon is raising this issue. So they know they are behind. And it even says right here in the video, China military grows, which we know it has. China got more new warships out there in the China Sea. And I was reading about that probably back in 2017. They have new warships and they are expanding their submarines. And so is Russia. Russia's also expanding on their submarines. So it says right here, as China military grows, Pentagon says U.S. forces atrophied. But please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen, about this news. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell. And you know what, y'all? This is actually biblical prophecy. Peace, family.